This bulletin proudly brought to you in association with Alex Campbell's Menswear.
Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to the South Today. I'm Daryl Baser. The COVID-19 pandemic alert level is at level 4 as of 11:59pm last night. Things are changing for New Zealand as this global pandemic continues to spread. The South Today isn't immune to the issues facing the nation as we all band together to stop the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus. We at Allied Press thank you for your viewership and understanding at this time as New Zealand joins the rest of the world in doing everything possible to reduce the impacts of the virus. In today's update of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are more sudden cases. The number of confirmed and probable COVID-19 cases in the south has risen by 12, bringing the total to 31. 2 Dunedin women in their 20s, a Queenstown woman in her 30s and a Wanaka man in his 20s have all tested positive for COVID-19. A state of emergency has been declared by the Prime Minister, putting the country into a month-long lockdown. Emergency Management Otago is assuring the public, police and other emergency services personnel will be looking after them and their property at this time. Police Acting Southern Commander Daryl Sweeney says police are well equipped to protect the community and will be out on the region's streets keeping people and property safe. In Dunedin, the South Today. As New Zealand enters a month of lockdown to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, Global Insight's Bruce Munro discusses the effects of coronavirus on the world as we know it with international relations expert Robert Patman.
Welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. New Zealand has more than 200 cases of the novel coronavirus COVID-19. Globally, there are 500,000 confirmed cases and more than 21,000 deaths. Welcome, Robert.
Morning, Bruce.
Thank you for joining us by video link.
Oh, it's a great pleasure.
New Zealand is in lockdown. Is this response typical of what's happening around the world?
It is, but I would say that New Zealand's position is quite different because many countries, Bruce, went into lockdown after sustaining deaths. So far, there hasn't been a death from COVID-19 in New Zealand, which is, of course, a very good welcome news. But many other countries, even the ones which have dealt with this very relatively successfully, like China, they only went into lockdown after 17 deaths. Many other countries, such as Italy, they went into lockdown after 463 deaths. Britain went in there after more than 300 deaths. France went into lockdown after about 148 deaths. So if you look at it comparison internationally, we have bitten the bullet at a much early stage. And as the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, indicated, we have a real chance, if this lockdown is well implemented and effectively implemented, of breaking the chain of internal transmission, which is crucial to turning the tide against coronavirus in New Zealand.
Governments are taking extraordinary steps and citizens' lives are suddenly very different. What are the implications of this global fight against COVID-19?
Well, I think the implications are very significant indeed. This could be a game-changing event in international terms. I think one of the implications immediately is that science is back. And what I mean by that is that we've had a succession of national populist leaders such as Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, Mr. Orban in Hungary, who've often rubbished and actually gained political traction in the process, rubbishing experts. And I think this latest crisis shows how dependent we are on public health professionals and scientists. So I think science is back. It's a crucial part of decision making in a complex, interdependent world. We can't solve problems like climate change We can't solve problems like COVID-19 without science input, and we can't solve economic and security problems without scientific understanding. So I think that's a welcome development.
We live in a globalised world, but all of a sudden national borders have become very important again. How well is this being managed internationally?
It's patchy. I think the World Health Organization has played a good role, and this is the dilemma, what we're witnessing are states basically using a self-help system to deal with this crisis. And we've seen an uneven performance. Some states have done quite well, South Korea, Singapore, China, after a shaky start, got the situation under control with regard to this outbreak of COVID-19. And I think New Zealand's been pretty proactive and looks like it's going to perform well overall when we're able to look back at this maybe a year's time. But, and it's a big but, there is a mismatch between what's going on and the nature of the problem. This is a problem which doesn't recognise borders, and yet we've got essentially national strategies for dealing with it. And that, quite frankly, is not good enough. We need to have much more international coordination to deal with this problem, because at the moment, even if the developed countries, of which New Zealand is one, manages to solve this problem, or at least curb it, where we can go about resuming normal life, the effects on developing countries, and remember, Iran was affected by this COVID-19 at a relatively early stage. It's now spread to the Middle East. Africa, Nigeria has now been affected. Many of these countries in the developing world do not have the health infrastructure that we take for granted in a country like New Zealand. And so the impact can be devastating. In short, I think one of the welcome changes, if that's the right way of putting it, or one of the, perhaps the upsides of COVID-19, is that we're rediscovering the need within New Zealand and many other developed countries for recognise the importance of ordinary people within society. And what I mean by that is that many of the people we depend on in our daily lives, essential workers, people who are doing jobs that do not hit the headlines but are vital, I think that there's a growing recognition of interdependence within society. But we need to extend that to a global focus, because quite frankly, we cannot curb this problem unless it is also curbed and addressed in the developing world. Why do I say that? Well, even if we developed a vaccine after 12 months, which eliminated the problem in the developed world, if this COVID-19 problem continued in the developing world, and it can be absolutely devastating there, we're talking about absolutely millions of lives, it could mutate into a new form which might defeat our efforts to develop a vaccine here. So we have, global solidarity towards COVID-19 is not only a moral imperative, it's also, if I may say so, out of self-interest that we basically try to get much greater international coordination towards this problem.
If this lockdown works for New Zealand, we're going to get to a stage where we can then move again quite freely within our border. But am I right in thinking that that will mean that there is no travel across borders? There'll be no planes taking passengers in and out of New Zealand until a vaccine is developed, which could be at least 12 months.
Yes, Bruce, I think your question sort of feeds into the point we've just discussed to some degree, but can be developed, which is without international coordination, whatever progress we make at home will be somewhat compromised by the fact that we are part and parcel of the international environment. And therefore, unless there is a global solution to what is a global problem, this problem doesn't recognize international boundaries. And it's very difficult for some of our decision makers to get their heads around this. Many of them have spent decades bashing international institutions like the UN, like the IMF, like the World Bank, and like the WTO. But at the end of the day, no country, even New Zealand or the United States, can unilaterally solve this problem. We can improve it within our boundaries, but we cannot eliminate it globally. And while it exists globally, it remains a threat to New Zealand and other countries.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Ka kite anō.
And in other news, the man accused of the March 15, 2019 terror attacks on two Christchurch mosques has changed his plea to guilty. A 29-year-old Australian national entered the guilty pleas at a special hastily arranged High Court hearing in Christchurch this morning. He appeared from prison on a screen via audio-visual link, wearing a grey prison sweatshirt, and pleaded guilty to all 51 murder charges. He also admitted 40 charges of attempted murder relating to the two attacks at the Al Noor Mosque and Linwood Islamic Centre on March 15th last year. He also pleaded guilty to one charge of engaging in a terrorist act under the Terrorism Suppression Act of 2002. In Dunedin, the South Today. Time now for a look at the weather.
Tonight's weather proudly brought to you by Mole Map.
Beginning with the situation. Be ready for a cold weekend ahead with frosty nights inland and cloud clearing about the coasts as an anticyclone arrives from the Tasman Sea to bring a spell of mostly fine weather. In the southern towns, Balclutha, the Catlins, Lumsden and Gore can all expect light southerlies, skies clearing and 11 degrees. Travelling westwards to the Central Lakes, Queenstown and Wanaka are both in for light southerlies, becoming fine and 12 degrees. Alexandra is set for a similar day, but slightly warmer on 13. And Te Anau is set to follow suit with light southerlies, clearing skies and 11 degrees. Heading north and along the coast, Timaru and Oamaru are due for light moderate southwesterlies, cloudy skies and 13 degrees. Heading inland, Twizel and Omarama are set to have light southerlies, clearing skies and 13 degrees. In Dunedin, showers clearing tonight with gusty cold southwesterlies at an overnight low of 8 degrees. It'll be cloudy and cold tomorrow with moderate southwesterlies, a high of 11 and a low of 8. Still mostly cloudy on Saturday, but cloud clears late in the day. It'll still be cold though, a high of 11 and a low of just 5 degrees. Showers clearing tonight with cold southwesterlies decreasing in Invercargill with an overnight low of 7 degrees. Clouds breaking and sunny periods increasing tomorrow with fresh cold southwesterlies decreasing and dying out, a high of 11 and a low of 5. Mostly fine and sunny on Saturday with light southerly quarter winds and cold temperatures, a high of 12 and a nippy low of just 2. And that's all from the South Today team for this Thursday. For the latest news from the southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook. And stay tuned for the latest update from the government after this. Have a great evening, stay calm during the pandemic, don't travel unless it's absolutely necessary, look out for your friends and whānau. Ka kite anō.
This bulletin proudly brought to you in association with Alex Campbell's Menswear.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.